On a cold February evening in 2016, 6 members of the Martinez family were going about their ordinary lives in their modest brick bungalow in Chicago's Gage Park neighborhood. Maria Martinez was upstairs in her small attic apartment. Her parents, Noah Sr. and Rasura, were downstairs. Her brother Noah Jr. was nearby, and her 2 young sons, 13-year-old Leonardo and 10-year-old Alexis, were playing in the house they called home. By morning, all 6 would be dead, shot, stabbed, and beaten to death in what would become known as the Gage Park Massacre. But this wasn't a random home invasion. This wasn't a gang-related killing. This wasn't even a crime of passion. This was a methodical execution carried out by someone the family trusted completely, someone they welcomed into their home without hesitation, someone who played with those children, shared meals at their table, and been treated like family. Today we're going to examine one of the most shocking betrayals in Chicago's criminal history, a case where the bonds of family meant nothing in the face of greed, manipulation, and $250 in cash, because what happened in that house on South California Avenue wasn't just murder. It was the complete destruction of trust, innocence, and the very concept of family loyalty. The Martinez family represented the American dream in its most humble form. Noah Martinez Sr., 62, had worked his entire life to provide for his family. His wife, Rasura, 58, was the heart of their household. Their son, Noah Jr., 38, was a dedicated worker who never missed a day at his job. Their daughter, Maria Herminia Martinez, 32, was a single mother doing her best to raise her 2 boys in a neighborhood that wasn't always safe. 13-year-old Leonardo Cruz was the older brother, protective and responsible beyond his years. 10-year-old Alexis Cruz was the baby of the family, full of energy and laughter. These weren't just statistics. These were real people with dreams, fears, and futures that were stolen from them. The family had recently moved into the small brick bungalow in Gage Park, a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's southwest side. Maria lived in a converted attic space while her parents and brother occupied the main floor. It wasn't much by most people's standards, but it was theirs. They had family game nights. They looked out for each other. They trusted the people they let into their lives. That trust would prove to be their fatal mistake. But to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to understand the person they trusted most. A young man who had been coming to their house for years. Someone the children called family. Someone who knew exactly how to get inside without raising any suspicion. Diego Uribe was 22 years old in February 2016, but his connection to the Martinez family went back years. He wasn't a stranger who targeted them randomly. He was Maria Martinez's nephew through her ex-husband. He had been a frequent visitor to their home, someone who played with Leonardo and Alexis, someone who was always welcomed at their dinner table. Neighbors would later tell police that Urebe played with those kids all the time. That family loved him. This wasn't hyperbole. This was the tragic reality of how completely the Martinez family had opened their hearts to someone who would ultimately destroy them. But beneath Uribe's familiar face was a young man struggling with his own demons. He was living in Chicago's little village neighborhood with his girlfriend, 19-year-old Jeffeth Ramos, and their infant son. Money was tight, Urebe didn't have a steady job, and the couple was struggling to make ends meet. They needed money for basic necessities, rent, food, milk, and diapers for their baby. According to court documents, both Urebe and Ramos had told people they needed money desperately. But instead of getting a job or asking for help, Uribe's mind turned to something much darker. He knew the Martinez family. He knew their routines. He knew they sometimes kept cash in the house. And most importantly, he knew they would let him in without question. What he was planning wasn't just robbery. It was a complete annihilation of a family that had shown him nothing but love and trust. February 2nd, 2016 started like any other day for the Martinez family. Noah Jr. went to work. The children went about their routines. Maria was in her attic apartment. Noah Sr. had gone to the store to pick up food for the family. Everything was normal, peaceful, ordinary. But around 5:30 p.m., that ordinary evening became a nightmare that would shock even seasoned Chicago homicide detectives. According to the prosecutor's case, built largely on the testimony of Jeffeth Ramos, Urebe had been planning this attack. On the afternoon of February 2nd, he showed Ramos a cowboy gun and told her he had a job to do. They drove to the Martinez house together. Ramos later testified, with Urebe carrying the weapon that would soon claim 6 lives. When they arrived at the small brick bungalow, the family did exactly what Urebe knew they would do. They welcomed him in with open arms. Maria offered them food. The children were happy to see their familiar visitor. There was no fear, no suspicion, no reason to think this night would be any different from the countless other times Uribe had visited. But Uribe had come with a purpose. He asked to speak privately with Maria in her attic apartment. Once they were alone, according to Ramos's testimony, he held his aunt at gunpoint and demanded money. What happened next was a cascade of violence so brutal and methodical that it defies comprehension. When Maria struggled over the weapon, Uribe shot her repeatedly. The sound of gunshots brought Noah Jr. rushing upstairs to investigate. Uribe beat him unconscious with the gun until it broke, then knelt on his neck until he died. When Rasura Martinez heard the commotion and threatened to call the police, Uribe kicked her down a flight of stairs and stabbed her dozens of times with a kitchen knife. But the most horrific part was yet to come. The children, 13-year-old Leonardo and 10-year-old Alexis, were still alive. Instead of letting them go, instead of showing mercy to the boys who had always been happy to see him, Uribe forced them to help search the house for valuables. Then, one by one, he murdered them. Ramos testified that Uribe took young Alexis to the basement and stabbed him repeatedly in the abdomen. When he returned upstairs, he cornered Leonardo in the living room. The 13-year-old boy, realizing what was happening, begged for his life. "Please no, please don't. I just want to live," he cried. Urebe stabbed him to death anyway. When Noah Martinez Sr. returned from the store that evening, he walked into a house of horrors. Urebe was waiting for him. The grandfather who had worked his entire life to provide for his family was beaten and stabbed to death in his own home. The total haul from this massacre? $250 in cash, some jewelry, and an Xbox game console, and the contents of a child's piggy bank. That's what 6 lives were worth to Diego Uribe, less than most people would spend on groceries in a week. But the monetary value wasn't even the most disturbing part. After killing the entire family, Uribe and Ramos attempted to stage the scene to make it look like a hate crime. They spray-painted racial slurs on the walls and mirrors, trying to make it appear as though the murders were racially motivated rather than a robbery gone wrong. They also tried to burn down the house to destroy evidence, but the fires they set failed to catch properly. Instead, they left behind a trail of evidence that would eventually lead police directly to them. The couple then waited for Noah Sr. to return home, murdered him, and drove away with their pathetic collection of stolen goods. The bodies weren't discovered until February 4th, when a co-worker of Noah Martinez Jr. became concerned that he didn't show up for work, something he never did. Police were called to perform a welfare check, and what they found inside that modest brick house would haunt them for years. "I got a TV knocked over and a coffee table knocked over," one officer reported as they peered through the front window. But when they made entry into the house, they discovered something far worse than a simple burglary. 6 bodies were scattered throughout the home, and 3 different weapons had been used in the attack. The investigation initially focused on the possibility that this was a hate crime, given the racial slurs found at the scene. But as detectives dug deeper, they began to uncover the truth. The break in the case came when DNA evidence found under Maria Martinez's fingernails matched Uribe. Uribe had voluntarily submitted DNA to authorities in March 2016, along with other family members as part of the investigation. He probably thought he was being helpful, clearing his name as a concerned relative. Instead, he was providing the evidence that would convict him. Phone records also placed Uribe in the area at the time of the murders. The digital trail was undeniable. He had been there, he had killed them, and he had tried to cover it up. On May 19, 2016, Diego Uribe and Jeffeth Ramos were arrested and charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming: DNA, phone records, and ultimately their own confessions. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Ramos herself. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she agreed to testify against Uribe, providing prosecutors with a detailed account of how the murders unfolded. Her testimony was chilling in its specificity, describing how Uribe methodically killed each family member while she watched. During the trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a crime so senseless, so brutal, that it challenged the very concept of human decency. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a calculated decision to murder 6 people, including 2 children, for a few $100s and some electronics. The defense tried to argue that Uribe couldn't have killed all 6 people by himself, suggesting that masked intruders were responsible. but the evidence was too strong, the testimony too detailed, and the DNA too conclusive. On October 5, 2022, more than 6 years after the murder, a Cook County jury found Diego Uribe guilty on all 6 counts of first-degree murder. The deliberation took just over 10 hours, a remarkably short time for such a complex case. The evidence was simply too overwhelming to ignore. Urebe sat in silence as the verdicts were read, showing no emotion as he learned he would spend the rest of his life in prison. On November 7, 2022, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Jeffeth Ramos, who had cooperated with prosecutors, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for her role in the murders. For the surviving family members, the verdicts brought some measure of justice, but no amount of legal proceedings could bring back the 6 people they had lost.
This vigil took place. Crisis responder Don Valente says Urebe was there.
To know that you were standing there hugging him, giving him, hugging him and telling him, if you need me, I'm here for you. And all along, he was the one who did it.
Armando Cruz, the father of Leonardo and Alexis, spoke to reporters after the verdict. "I just want to remember them all with love and not this pain." The Gage Park massacre didn't just destroy one family. It shattered an entire community's sense of safety and trust. The idea that someone could murder 6 people, including 2 children, for such a trivial amount of money challenged everything people believed about human nature. The case became a symbol of how violence can tear apart the fabric of trust that holds communities together. If you couldn't trust family, if you couldn't trust the people closest to you, who could you trust? The case also highlights how financial desperation can lead to unthinkable acts. Urebe and Ramos weren't facing homelessness or starvation. They needed money for diapers and milk. The disproportion between their need and their response reveals a level of moral bankruptcy that defies rational explanation. But perhaps most disturbing is how easily Urebe was able to carry out the murders because of the family's trust. They let him in without question. They never suspected danger from someone they considered family. That trust became their death sentence. Today, the house on South California Avenue stands as a quiet monument to a family that should still be alive. The neighborhood has moved on, but the memory of what happened there lingers like a shadow. Noah Martinez Sr. will never see another grandchild grow up. Rasua Martinez will never cook another family meal. Noah Jr. will never go to work again. Maria Martinez will never see her boys graduate, get married, or have children of their own. And Leonardo and Alexis Cruz will never have the chance to become the men they were meant to be. Diego Uribe sits in a prison cell serving a life sentence for destroying 6 lives over $250 in an Xbox. Jeffeth Ramos will be released someday, but she'll carry the weight of what she witnessed and participated in. Thank you for staying with us through this haunting story. We love to hear your thoughts on this case, so please don't hesitate to leave a comment. And if you have any suggestions about other stories you'd like us to cover, please let us know. Your time and attention help keep these cases from fading into silence, and for that, we're truly grateful. By shining a light on the darkest corners, we hope to spark more awareness, empathy, and ultimately compassion in the world, because only by facing the darkness can we begin to change it. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious. You're watching Common Sense Ain't Common.